So, welcome everybody. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm not speaking about the weather outside, I'm just speaking about European Parliament, so good afternoon. Of course, as always, I'll do apologize for all the safety measures when suffering all the checks. Just have in mind, please, that all those boys and girls from safety department also have to pay mortgages, so be patient and sorry for all these inconveniences. I'm happy to welcome you at the already fifth symposium on sustainable use of pesticides, which is under the name Unlocking the IPM Triangle Using Green Tools First. Yes, one thing also first, and it is technical note. We have a simultaneous translation, and if you need, then English is on channel 2, French is on channel 3, and we have also Italian, which is on channel 4. I would like to express big thanks to everyone who made this year event possible, especially the symposium's co-organizers and our long-standing partners, Pesticides Action Network Europe, Pan-Europe, International Biocontrol Manufacturers Association, IBMA, and International Organization for Biological and Integrated Control. And of course, big thanks to all members of my own team, especially Chief of my office, Joseph, who is making the photos over there, and he has spent a lot of time on the organization of all necessary things here in Parliament, and believe me, you wouldn't want to be in his shoes. I welcome all of our distinguished guests and speakers. Thank you all for coming and agreeing to actively participate in the symposium. I'm very pleased to see that even Mr. Martin Suchanek, a speaker from my country, from Czech Republic, will also contribute to our program. Hi, Martin. As there are many of you on the speakers list, and our time is a bit short, I will not dare to welcome you now one by one, but you will be properly introduced by our great and very much experienced moderator, Professor Michael Hamel. Hi, Michael. Who will take us through the symposium, as I have to leave soon due to other commitments. Our event is live streamed, so I hope everyone out there, everywhere in Czech Republic, Italy, Spain, Portugal and other places of the world are hearing and seeing us well. Hello. For those of you in the room who have not served yourself with a cup of coffee or tea yet, feel free to do so quietly any time during the conference over there. Finally, let me remind you that once the symposium is over, it is not over yet, as we will move down to the MEP saloon for a wine tasting cocktail, where you are all warmly invited. As the MEP salon could be difficult for some of you to find, I recommend you to follow us on our way there. Illustrations of several techniques which will be discussed here today will be shown at the MEP salon as well. So not only for wine, but also for education, you should visit MEP salon at, I think, 7. Before we start with the presentation, let me say a few words about our star of the day, the wine Cassina Clarabella. It's certified as organic, which means it was produced without the use of herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, and only with organic fertilizers. This winery is a social cooperative, employing many mental and social disabled persons for their rehabilitation. As you probably know, I very much support and advocate for substituting plant protection products with non-chemical alternatives. Those changes, however, cannot be made from day to day. They can happen, but only if they happen stepwise. Cassina Clarabella is the perfect example. I'm not sure if I pronounce it well. Cassina Clarabella. It's perfect. And it's also a perfect example. The farmer started by introducing one alternative, then observed and monitored the impact, and consequently started to get more in contact with the nature. This was also the time when the farmer realized that the need for bigger change. He moved away from only thinking about yield and productivity and transitioned towards thinking in long-term economic terms. Then the farmer started to think about how much the yield goes down over time versus how much could he save by buying less pesticides. He started to think about the fact that by applying pesticides, one does not kill only the pests, but also the beneficiaries and the pollinators which should help managing the pest in the first place. That was a moment when the farmer changed his understanding of integrated pest management, and that led him to a change of agronomic practices. The farmer moved from an approach of killing pests to an approach of managing pests. This is not an utopia, it is a perfect picture, and in fact it is the vision to follow. We will finally move towards such an agriculture model, which uses less chemicals and protects human health and environment to the greatest possible extent. You ask me probably, how can I be so sure? And it is very simple, because otherwise we will extinct. We cannot change this overnight, but we have a legislation in place, and the legislation needs to be respected and implemented. That's why I am pushing the Commission and the Member States to step up their efforts and make the alternatives, namely biological low-risk pesticides, available to the farmers as soon as possible. That's why I object the reauthorization of certain pesticides, and that is why I insist that the criteria to identify, for example, endocrine disruptors have to be scientific. That is why we hold this symposium, showing the way out is possible, viable, healthier, and for those who care too much for money, even cheaper. Thank you, and I now pass to Michael. The floor is yours. In fact, everything is yours.
Yes, now everything is mine. Thank you, Pavel. I think it's particularly important to thank Pavel for his continued support for this conference year after year. As he said, it's our fifth time to look at the Sustainable Use of Pesticides Directive, our fifth time to, in this case, the language, as he said, being to unlock the IPM triangle using green tools first. We're not doing this, or at least the organisers are not doing this out of some kind of masochism, some kind of wish to come to the European Parliament every year and to say some nice things but make no progress. The purpose of this conference is to make progress on the better implementation of the Sustainable Use of Pesticides Directive, so that we have, in that aspect, a more sustainable agriculture. I look back last year at the conclusions that came out of this conference, and those conclusions were based on the 4 years. And it's interesting, just as we start, to mention them to you, and I'll be very brief. What the conclusions of the 4 years basically said, that the registration process, the whole business of getting a biological control agent into place and on farms is unfit for purpose, the system. That there's a lack of research into biological control systems, that there's a lack of centres for biological control, but that there are some possibilities emerging within the CAP, and we'll see that later on, that there's a limited interest by the major companies, the major chemical companies, in going down the road of IPM and the aspect of it where they could have some significant expertise to offer, that there's a lack of ambition in the action programmes of the member states from under the directive, and that there's no progress in relation to linking the implementation of IPM under the Sustainable Directive with cross-compliance within the CAP. I just mentioned those 4 or 5 conclusions to you to make aware those who haven't been here before that there's been a very serious amount of thinking done in relation to improving implementation, which is not done just simply for implementation's sake, but to have a more sustainable agriculture and a safer food process. And I put that forward to you in your thinking as you take part in this conference, whether you're taking part here or whether you're in the centres around Europe which are participating. Let me, likewise, having said that, welcome everybody here. And let me not take up any more time, because time is of the essence, and I'm going to straight away hand over to our first speaker. And my understanding, but you'll tell me if I'm wrong, my understanding, Cristina Micheloni, from an agronomist with the Italian Association of Organic Agriculture, her speech is how sustainable grape growing can contribute to local development. Grape growing is the theme within this year's conference, but it is only the theme that underpins what we do in the more general sense about the implementation of the directive. And I understand that you have a video to start with, if that's correct. So could we roll on the video?
It is always so.
So I start, it's even better because to speak after Ruggero Mazzilli is always difficult, so somehow I feel lucky that we have this change. So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really honored and glad to be here, and thank you very much to the organizer and to the European Parliament to organize this occasion to exchange and to share what we know and what we want to do in order to progress towards the reduction and avoidance, if we can, at a certain point, use of pesticide in agriculture. As it was said, I come from the organic sector, and I'm going to bring the example of organic viticulture as an example of sustainable practice in viticulture. I know, I am aware it's not the only form of sustainable viticulture, but I think it's somehow the best example as it has been legally defined from the field to the wine, to the cellar. So I think and there is a lot of experience now gathered around the organic management of viticulture, and it is somehow a success story in the last year. So I think it's good to tell it, and also at the end we are going to toast with an organic wine, so I think it fits to the purpose of the day. I don't know if I'm able to, yes. Fantastic. So just a few figures to start to describe what I'm talking about. If I take the data available at worldwide level about the organic vineyard in the world from 2013, just because they are the last one available, they report about 300,000 hectares of organic vineyard. But by December 2016, I gathered the national data from Spain, France, and Italy, and they report about 100,000 hectares each. So just an estimation leads me to say that in these few years, in 3 years, we more or less double the surface of organic vineyard worldwide. But anyhow, it is a European business. 90%, even more than 90% of the organic vineyard is in Europe. It's something we should be aware of and somehow proud of, or somehow make use of it. I mean, to be convinced that it's something that started in Europe and has a great value in Europe. But it has also a good market value outside Europe for the European wine producers. So that's something we have to keep in mind. These are some data, but I would like to bring a few more figures about some Italian areas where organic farming in viticulture is having quite a lot of success. Many of you probably know Franciacorta wine production. It's a typical wine. It is in a northern part of Italy, so somehow a difficult area to grow grape because of downy mildew, and so it's not an easy area. Anyhow, the appellation of origin is about 3,000 hectares of vineyard, and nowadays 60% of it is organic, is already organic, either in conversion, either organic. I give you another example about Chianti area, maybe it's much well known than Franciacorta. In the heart of Chianti, I mentioned Gaiole, Panzano, the villages where the majority, the historic Chianti area is produced. There, 85% of the vineyard is already organic, certified organic. That doesn't mean that all the wine that comes out of it is bringing on the label organic, for many reasons. One of them is that some of the producers are still under conversion, so we will see it in a couple of years. So that is the background. But what I would like to focus on now with you is that organic viticulture is not simply the non-use of synthetic pesticides. That is somehow the outcome, but it's not for sure the starting point. In order to reach that point, we need to do several other things before in order to be able to do without synthetic pesticide. And I highlight the synthetic because we use some inputs, but we use natural, mineral, microbiological inputs. So it's not where we use nothing. We use certain kind of products. As it is somehow shown by the picture, the road towards organic viticulture is somehow uphill, but it's full of flowers. So we have to be able to reach the point of not using pesticides before saying I don't use them. And what does it mean? Before reaching the point of being able to do without, we have, for example, to put attention to a few things that I really summarize in very short words. First of all, to regain and to reconsider where we plant a vineyard. The vocation of territories is really important. We cannot produce wine, organic wine everywhere. And as probably Ruggero will say afterwards in the video, the areas where organic viticulture is not possible, probably we have to consider if it is the case to grow a vineyard there, because if it is not possible to grow it organic, probably it is not the place where to grow grape wine. Then the second pillar of this reasoning is which plant and which rootstock to plant. There are many efforts around Europe done mainly by producers on mass selection of varieties and of plants, and in the last 30 years we have been simplifying very much the genetic material behind the wine production. Now I think it's time to complicate it back again and to regain the differences. So somehow to bring back to the vineyard different varieties and different rootstocks fitting local conditions. There is also a lot of effort in research, very technological research for resistant varieties. I think it's a good way to go. We don't probably need genetic engineering to do so, but it takes time. And in the meanwhile, I think we have a lot of material, especially autochthonous varieties, local varieties, that could be exploited, that are really fitting the purpose of a higher sustainability of the vineyard. The third point I want to manage is the environment. As I mentioned already, we simplify too much the vineyard cultivation. We have to bring back also some other elements. We have areas where only a couple of clones of grape are grown, not even few varieties, few clones. So if we want a resilience there, we need to diversify that. And that is going on as well. Cristina Carlos is going to talk about that afterwards, and I don't spend more time on that. Soil management is another point we have to be very careful on. The roots are somehow the brain of the vineyard. If we manage to keep them healthy, all the rest comes somehow easier. Then there is the canopy management. There has been a lot of debate about the pruning system and the physiology, the respect of physiology of the vine. For many years we have been really simplifying also the management, topping, for example, the vine that recalls much more vigor into the canopy. That means also to increase the risk of pest and disease attack, because the plant is much more vulnerable to them. So also the physiological, to study back physiology of vine could be of really a lot of help. And finally, we need some technology. Organic farming, organic viticulture is not to grow grape wine as it used to be done 50 years ago. We need a lot of technology for monitoring system, for decision support system, and many other tools that make the things easier for the organic wine growers. All what we need and what I just mentioned is not only leading to organic viticulture or organic wine production, they are also the same, they share the same way to authenticity, typical production, what is usually called terroir. Then I'm always a little bit scared what is terroir, and I'm never able to really give a complete answer to that. But what I just described is also leading the producer to produce some very special wine for each place, for each terroir, for each area, that has also a market advantage. It is leading also to resilience towards the climate change. That is something going on and we don't have to forget, because it's putting at risk not only wineries but all agriculture. So in these changes, we should also be able to go keeping on producing grape not only today and tomorrow, but even in the coming years. And finally, it is increasing the knowledge and skills of wine growers, and that is also an element of social sustainability, of social resilience. If we do all that, we also increase the revenues to the wine producers, and that is giving stability and economic sustainability to the sector. Then, if we think that we are already been shown and demonstrated that we can run organically a farm, a viticultural enterprise, a wine enterprise, but I think we should also start to think about not only the farm, but the area. And there are also examples on this. In Italy we call it biodistretti, organic district, I think we should translate it into English. That is somehow a way to manage organically not only one or two farms, but an area. 2,000 hectares, 3,000 hectares, where organic farming is not 100% of the surface, but is the main actor of the agricultural activity of the area, but is linking also to tourism, for example. And is, first of all, creating a nice environment where to live. So we don't have to think, first of all, to tourists, but first of all, to the people living there. So I'm afraid I described somehow a perfect situation so far, that everything is easy to be done and fantastic in organic viticulture. It's not like that. It's not everything is easy. It's very knowledge intensive. I mean, we still need a lot of knowledge, a lot of scientific knowledge, but also a lot of practical knowledge. And we should be able, even through the tools that the European Commission is offering now in the last year, for example, the European Initiative on Innovation in Agriculture, to put together scientific knowledge together with practical knowledge, with tested knowledge, in order to impact on the reality, not only on the publication of researchers, so to say, but also to have an impact on real work, on daily work of wine producers. I just give you an example. I know this word can open up a lot of debate, as it is already doing, but for example, in organic viticulture, we still use copper. It is something that we would like to get rid of it. We would love to be able to say we don't need them, but this is not so. We would lie if we say we can do organic wine without copper. We are still using it. We are reducing it in the last year very much, but we still need it. And if tomorrow somebody will say, okay, copper is out, we will stop all this development, this fantastic development in organic viticulture all over Europe. But I want to show you also some figures that were given to me by Enzo Mescalchin from Fondazione Mac Foundation in Trento. It's about the reduction in the use of copper in the years. It starts from 1996. Of course, it changes a little bit year by year depending on the weather, but it leads up to 3 kilos per year in 2011. Last year, 2016, it has been quite a difficult year all over Europe. It was a lot really complicated. So maybe we use a little bit more copper, but if I compare it to the amount of copper that was used for example, in the year 2000. Why do I remember the year 2000? Because it was the year in which in the IFOAM basic standards we introduced the limit of 8 kilograms per hectare per year. In that years we made a survey, the average amount of copper used per hectare per year was 25 kilos. Because Bordeaux mixture was the only product available, so with Bordeaux mixture in bad years you use that much amount. In the years it has been reduced really a lot. So if nowadays we are progressing in this reduction, I think the 4 kilos, 3 kilos in good years, 2 kilos in 2 years are possible. But as I said, to do without is not possible today. I really hope we can get rid of it very soon, but today is not possible. Few more figures about the effect of copper, because everybody is saying, not everybody, but many people is claiming that copper has a dramatic impact on soil life. Well, I think on soil life, copper has an impact, but it's not the only factor. For example, in this slide, you can read the correlation in between the copper use and the amount of earthworms in the soil. And you can see there is not so closely related, because there are other factors. For example, the amount of organic matter in the soil that is changing very much the biological activity in the soil, how much the soil is compacted. I mean, the earthworms and all the microbial activity is linked to oxygen, water, and organic matter to be transformed. So copper is one factor, but also we can manage it with other tools. And in organic farming, we are doing that. So I think I ran out of time, so I'm going to my last slide. Organic wine is much more than pesticide-free. And if it is pesticide-free, it is because several other things have been done before. And it is a key to give value not only to the wine, but also to places, to people, to environments, and to the skills, and to human resources, and to the knowledge. So I think we have to put together all this value in order to assess how much it can give to Europe. But all it can be implemented through diversity. Diversity is really the key to the good implementation of all these practices. But to go really to 100% pesticide-free and also copper-free viticulture, I think we still need a bit of time and much more knowledge. We need much more research, but also some more extension, because there is a huge difference, for example, between the best organic wine grower and the average organic wine grower. So to bring also the average, or the not best one, I don't want to say the worst one, but not the best one, to the level of the best ones, we need not only research, but really a lot of extension, dissemination, very practical activity. And that is still quite the key and the bottleneck to the wider and better implementation of organic viticulture. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Isabel, are we able to go to the video? Maybe. While we're waiting, let's take any questions that you have on the first presentation. Please, give your name and
my name
and organisation, if you would, please.
My name is Sabine Henning-Helwig, and I'm working as a regulatory consultant in agrochemicals in my own company, SH Consultancy. I would like to come back to the copper, because I also use copper in residue trials, and we combined with conventional active substances. Your table, you showed how much copper you need and how many treatments you do during a season. Is this also in comparison to a combination with conventional active substances, or is it only copper, as you say, in this original use? Historically.
The one I show you is from Trentino region, is only dealing with organic and only with copper. That was only copper. There are other data also comparing, and last week we had a chance to discuss it really here in Brussels about the different areas and different combination of products, especially vegetable oils or plant-based products, and also yeast, I have to say. And, well, in that table is only copper, but there are also data about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take another question. Yes.
Martin Dermien. I'm working for Pan Europe. Thank you for the very interesting presentation. I was wondering whether if you knew if there were a lot of alternatives to copper that are under research for the moment, and if there are already field trials, and what are the perspectives if we think that we can get rid of copper within 10 years or 50 years? Thank you.
Well, I'm not able to guess the number of years we still need. There is a lot of research done on alternative products and also on products that can improve the efficacy of copper. So, for example, all over Europe, I mean, there has been at least 3 large research projects on copper replacement. Several substances are promising, but then from the moment in which you have a promising substance till the moment in which it is really applicable in the field, it takes a bit of time. So far, I don't see
Hi, my name is Ruggero Mazzilli. I am an Italian.
It's okay. Well, I try to finish the answer then. So I don't think there is 1 or 2 substances now really we have to make a bet on and say in 2 or 3 years we will get rid of copper due to this. There are several promising ones, but they still need years. And personally, I am convinced that the solution is not coming from 1 or 2 substances, but really from a system approach. If we are able to put together genetic breeding for more tolerance, winery management, and other substances, then we can manage. But to hope in a silver bullet able to solve it all, also because we have also other pathogens that when you stop using copper come up. You don't realize you have them as far as you don't stop using copper. And they are even more scary than mildew, than black. Yeah.
Please.
Paul Leonard, I work for BASF, and we supplied the vine industry for many years.
My name is Ruggero Mazzilli. I am.
So that's a nice introduction. So I just wondered, I mean, it strikes me that many people buy organic produce because they believe fervently that there are no pesticides. So my question is, isn't there a lack of clarity or honesty in the process of consumers actually buying organic products? Wouldn't it be better to actually describe it as something other than not containing pesticides?
Well, I fully agree. When I wrote in the beginning, it is not using synthetic pesticide, because that is the correct definition, I mean, also in the regulation, in the EU regulation. But I think as the EU regulation defining what can be used in organic farming is very clear. It has been published the first year in 2093. And I think a lot of communication, I mean, the consumers who want to know. Of course, not all the consumers, but that is for any kind of products. And I agree with you. When I try to explain what organic farming is, I never start with is a non-pesticide agriculture.
Well, I really appreciate that. And by the way, I don't believe that copper oxychloride or tribasic copper or even Bordeaux mixture is a natural substance. It's made in a factory, and I don't really understand what this synthetic thing is about. It'd be much better to use other measures of sustainability, in my opinion.
Well, it has been really a long debate in the last 30 years about that and about the definition, even in the regulatory framework, what is synthetic and what is not. So if you want, we can debate it for many hours, but I think that in the regulation somehow it is written that something that it is or natural origin or naturally identical is to be considered potentially usable in organic. Then there is a committee, the ECTOP, who is assessing somehow each product that has been requested to be used in organic. And of course, when you try to trace a line, it's never easy. So somehow it is going like that. But I think year after year, we are refining this line. And copper is one of the tricky substances we still have to face and try to solve. I agree with you. I would like to do without. That's clear.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Ruggero Mazzilli. I am an Italian agronomist. Thank you very much for the invitation. Excuse me if today I am not there with you, and for my English that is not so good. I have been working in organic viticulture for over 30 years. To support my activity, 10 years ago I founded SPEVIS, a private society to monitorize vineyards and to test new strategies for organic viticulture. Actually, SPEVIS works on about 3,200 hectares of organic vineyards all over Italy. On this website, you can find all the information about our activity and download for free our publication. So, For the wine growers, there are many problems, as you know, but no one of them can be seen and managed separately. On a side, we have pathogen virulence depending on meteo trends, and on the other side, we have plant susceptibility depending on springtime vegetative growth. The factors in play are many: logistic, agronomics, and season. For each disease, we classify areas or vineyards in 3 groups according to potential risk gradient, and we prepare different correction prevention strategies according to the season. We work by 3 levels, always in this sequence. The first, reduce susceptibility for plant vineyard area. The second, epidemiological knowledge of the pathogen. At last, direct phytoiatric interventions. For the first point, we refer agronomics methods, right pruning, green management, soil management, etc. Because when a plant feels fine, is more resistant to disease, we also work for its zonation on phytoiatric basis. Of course, that is not possible to make a good organic viticulture without at first making a good viticulture. We are sure that organic is a good opportunity to let viticulture grow. For the second point, we make systemic monitoring on all territory. We work to promote biodistrict. We use a network of local weather stations with wireless sensors and other tools. In this way, we can reduce the number of treatments to and over the health. For direct phytoiatric intervention, the co-formulation are very important to reduce the dosage. So are the right tests about natural alternatives and about the possibility of blocking action. In this way, we can reduce the dosage of treatments to and over the health. But the most important thing is to learn to see the territory as it really is, not as we usually see it. The territory is not the sum of the single property, but the ensemble of all the property, just like it is seen by the pathogens. In conclusion, if we are talking about how to fight a disease, we cannot talk only about the disease, the weather, and the pesticide. There is another very important subject in play, which is the plant, the susceptibility of the plants, and this depends on us, on the agronomic strategies we use in the whole territory, not only in a single property. When we use the right agronomic strategies, the susceptibility of the plants is lower, the virulence of the disease is lower, and so the pesticides we use are less. And moreover, there is the possibility to use natural alternative with greater success. So the costs are lower, while the quality of grapes is higher, and also the territorial imprinting grows, and that is very important for the wine growers and for the future of viticulture. Well, that's all. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a nice day, have a nice life, and stay forever young. Bye. Ciao Cristina, ciao Terra Viva.
Thank you. Okay, I think the best thing we can do now is go on to the second session, and could I ask the speakers to come up and take their place here for the second session. Christina, if you want to join us for the discussion after this, I think it would be helpful if you okay, and so let's take everybody up to the table, and we'll go straight away. Yeah. Okay, while others are coming, can I welcome Paola Colombo, the Director in Sante for Food Audit and Analysis, to speak on EU policies encouraging sustainable vine growing. And that's the broad title, and then the more detailed title, How EU Regulation on Authorisation and EU Directive on Sustainable Use Contribute to IPM Grape Growing. That's a broad title for you, Paola. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Actually, I'm not going to elaborate a lot on wine growing, and I will stay rather general, but nevertheless, I'm really grateful to be here today to explain to you what we are doing in the Commission in this sector. And while you might be upset or regret that my Deputy Director General is not here today for some out of schedule meeting with our Commissioner, I am very glad to be here, and I'm going to explain to you why. I'm actually the director of a service which is based in the countryside of Ireland. It's been a political decision that we all celebrate. It's a lovely place, logistically perhaps not the most convenient, but I guess that Professor Hammer knows it very well, in the north of Dublin. And what we do, I'm going backward. What we do in our service is basically checking and control the implementation and the enforcement of the EU legislation. And we do that on the spot. This is a unique service in the Commission because it basically gives us the power to go to the Member States and also to third countries to check how our legislation on food safety is implemented. We do also a fitness check, and we inform our colleague in the policy unit in Brussels about the fitness of the current legislation. So our audits cover food, animal feed, animal health and welfare, and plant protection products. And since very recently, so since few months, we have inherited from Brussels the responsibility of ensuring the correct implementation of the Sustainable Use Directive. So this is why I'm particularly happy to be here today, because it's the first time actually that I'm exposed to stakeholders and to present the state of play and what we are going to do. And I keep going backward. Voila. So I need to repeat once again something that you probably heard from other Commission officials many times. The fact that the contribution at EU level on sustainable food production is gigantic and has been there for the last 20 years. So we have a legislation which support and supporting measure on plant protection products, which has been there for 20 years, and we are unique in the world to have that. So despite your perception of the situation, is a legislation that imposes a strict framework for approval, the authorization then of plant protection product by the Member State, the establishment of maximum residue limit, the control on marketing and use of pesticides, and then the Sustainable Use Directive. And I would like to stress that all these elements need to be present and correctly implemented to ensure a sustainable use of pesticides. So it's not enough to concentrate on that piece of legislation. All the rest need to be implemented as well. In terms of authorization, I heard already mention the issues of the low-risk active substance. We are committed to move on and rather rapidly on criteria for the approval of low-risk active substance. the proposal will be adopted in the first half of this year, and we are also given priority to the review program, to the renewal of approval of pesticide to low-risk substance. And this, I hope, is a good news for everyone. Sustainable use of directive, I'm not prolonging very much. You're all familiar with this piece of legislation. But where I would like to pause is about who is responsible of what for this directive. So here we have a directive which provides a general framework, is not crop specific, and this is the reason why today I cannot elaborate much on wine growing. And the reason why is not crop specific is because it's left to the subsidiarity, is left to the member state to implement this directive, because they know, it's not Brussels, but member state, and you as well, know what is best for the agriculture in your own country. And all other players also need to be engaged in this. So the Commission as well, in terms of supporting the implementation of this directive, but also US stakeholders, the industry, the grower association, the NGOs by any means. And it's important that everyone is taking his share of responsibility in this, to offer eventually to the farmer the famous box tool where they can decide which is the best way to basically to produce in a more sustainable way. More specifically, as I said before, we cannot simply concentrate on the sustainable use of pesticide directive. There is a need to implement also the step before, which are foreseen by the legislation on pesticide. For example, there is all a number of activity that the competent authority of the member state and the grower themselves need to do in the post-authorization of plant protection products. They need to be used properly and need to be used in compliance with the provision of the Sustainable Use Directive. On the integrated pest management, once again, is all up to the member state. Most of member states, I would say basically the totality, have guidelines available, which has been drafted by themselves with normally with research institute and grower association. In some member states also there is a financial support which is available through the rural development programs. So you will say, so far so good. We try to make some linking through the IPM to grape growing, but as I say, all the legislation is not crop specific and allow me to move immediately probably to the most interesting part of this presentation, I hope for you. So where we are and where we are going in the implementation on the sustainable use of pesticide directive. We are not very far, we can say that. Has not been, while everyone agreed that it is an essential piece of legislation, we must recognize that in the recent year we haven't paid the necessary attention to the implementation of this directive. We can say this, we have been very open on that because of other priorities, because of issues of resource. It's now time to change and to move on in a more energetic way. So up to far, the implementation of this directive has been discussed in various working groups. We have conducted a series of audits in plant protection products, and in these audits we have also checked some element of the implementation of the Sustainable Use Directive. And we can say that there's been a reasonable progress by the member state. I mean, there are evidence that the member states are implementing this measure, but what we have found is that sometimes these measures are a bit vague. I'm not saying that they are not good, but there is definitely what we call some room for improvement. We are coming out soon with our overview reports. Our overview reports are basically reports that summarize the finding of a series of audits. And so soon we are coming out with an overview report that we have done in 11 member states, checking the marketing and the use of plant protection products, and also in 8 member states, checking where we are, how the authorization of plant protection product is implemented. Again, in the framework of this audit, we have also checked some elements of the implementation of the Sustainable Use Directive, including integrated pest management. It's time now to change a bit the speed, and this is what we are now committed to do. So our first priority, and this long-term due, will be a report to the Parliament and to the Council on the progress of the implementation of the Sustainable Use Directive. We have launched a survey to all Member States, asking them to let us know if they have update of the national action plans. And we will conduct an analysis on that by May. This report will basically merge together the report which was due in 2014 on the Article 4 of the directive on the National Action Plan, and the regular report on the progress of implementation, which is prescribed by the Article 16 of the directive. But most importantly, and I really stress this with all my heart, will be the missions that we are going soon to conduct to a selection of member states for this year on the actual implementation of the directive. Because it's all very nice to read the National Action Plan. Apart that they seem to be a bit, as I say, a bit vague in their objective and in their target. But having said that, there is nothing better in life that go on the spot and see seriously what the member states are doing in this field. This is our experience. And I think that the result will be particularly interesting to move forward. By the way, when we were preparing the plan and we were sending out the pre-audit questionnaire to the member state, we were informed that we were going to attend this meeting. So the big news for Italy is that we will definitely cover the wine growing during our mission in Italy, so be prepared. The report itself will be finalized by the autumn. We have already another number of priorities, so as you can see, we are really trying to accelerate all need to be done by the Commission through the directive. First of all, a strategic guidance on the monitoring and surveying impacts of plant protection product use in human health and environment. These come from the directive. We are revamping the website, which is going to be the instrument to allow communication between member states and stakeholders and the Commission. We are going to have training. The BTSF, sorry for the acronym, is Better Trainings for Safer Food. This is something very good that we are extensively organizing for member states and also business operators to receive training on specific technical issues of our legislation, but also allowing member states to exchange good practices. We have excellent example of very successful training activity in this respect. Is a way of try to steer harmonization in a sector which is actually handled in the hands of member states by subsidiarity. We have a number of meetings, working groups scheduled. We have also research projects. I hear that this is also something that is very much needed, together with DG Agriculture and DG Research. And last but not least, the most, I would say, difficult bit that we need to do is harmonized risk indicators. This is probably mission impossible or quasi impossible, but we will definitely give it a try with the help of our statistic office and the OECD. So to conclude, I hope that I stay in my allotment. We have less and less available pesticide, so it's even more important that non-chemical methods and IPM is available. We are, as a Commission, we would like to pass you the message with all our credibility and honesty that this now is become for us an important dossier on which we are going to work intensively, and we rely on your support and also encouraging common understanding and efforts in this field. Thank you so much, and I invite you to visit our website where you can find in full transparency all the reports of our audit that we have conducted so far. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
I'm not going to allow questions at this stage. I'm going to allow discussion. I'll take all the speakers and then I'll open the floor for questions, and I'm sure you will have quite a number of questions. So we'll move on straight away then to how the CAP is encouraging IPM grape growing, including the uptake of biological control elements in Luxembourg by Pierre Trenin, who is the director in the Luxembourg Ministry of Agriculture and Viticulture. Pierre.
Merci, Professor Hamel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamel. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for inviting me here today to talk to you about the measures that we've implemented in Luxembourg in the wine growing sector to try to stimulate a reasoned and sustainable approach to this sector. Firstly, I want to share with you some information about our vineyards. They're along the Moselle River, about 42 kilometers worth. So it's quite a small area. We're talking about 1% of the agricultural land in Luxembourg, so 1,250 hectares, 150 to 200 millimeters. The specific characteristics of our vineyard mean that, well, first of all, we have a lot of precipitation. We have about 730 litres per metre squared. And it's interesting to note that the average temperature is around 11% as well, which is quite unique for this small area in the north of the country. It can reduce to about 8 degrees. This is a little microclimate that we have around the Moselle. The main diseases that we experience are mildew. This is the #1 and most dangerous disease. This year, well, last year in May and June, we had 300 millimeters of rain, which is twice the average. So as you can see, that increased the mildew, and that meant that we lost quite a lot of our harvests. We also have botrytis and oidium, which are major problems. There's also the grape worm as well, which is the main pest. So what have we done? How did we implement the IPM triangle in Luxembourg? As part of the measures that we have under the second pillar of the CAP. Well, I'll start from the bottom of this slide. Firstly, we had climate-related measures that we introduced in the vineyard. We removed grass from between the crops. We increased biodiversity, and we also applied mechanical techniques to remove weeds. These were quite promising in the fight against pests. Secondly, we made investments in mechanical equipment to try to help us combat these diseases. We used mechanical weed removers, so this was all part of our investment in that area. We also introduced a measure to confuse the sexual and reproductive systems of these grape pests to reduce the population. And of course, we also, at the top of the slide, you can see this, we introduced phyto products too, with the aim of substituting them at a later stage. I'll move on now to talk about our approach. This was a horizontal environmental agricultural measure, if I can describe it that way. For each hectare of wine growing land, we applied the different measures I mentioned, and we have about 8 hectares out of the 1,200 which are currently under this program. We also introduced herbicides at an early stage, and we apply this substitution principle. What I mean is that we aim to introduce phytopharmaceutical products to keep pests to a minimum and to encourage pollinating insects. For example, we banned perotrinoids and nicotinoids in the fields, and these can no longer be applied. Another measure that we introduced was organic measures. These were very successful in Luxembourg. It costs about €200 per hectare to apply these measures, and we have applied this on 100% of the wine growing area. Here I have put on the slide around 95% of a reduction of insecticide use, but if you have any further questions about that, I can go into more detail. But I can tell you that all of the vineyards are treated with this measure in Luxembourg. Here are 2 interesting examples. Normally you have the male pest that finds the female, these little worms, in order to mate, but insecticides prevent that from happening. By confusing the reproductive systems of the worms, the male can't find the female, so this prevents them from, these grape worms from multiplying. And that's all without the use of insecticides. And this is 95% of the vineyards in Luxembourg are treated in this way. The next pillar has to do with the investments that I mentioned in mechanical equipment and physical equipment. We used a leaf removal machine, for example, which helped us to reduce botryticides by 50% to 100%. We also used mechanical weed removers underneath the vines, which meant that we could reduce our use of herbicides by between 80 and 100%. You can see here the figures for the investments that we made, and I think that they were largely sufficient for these kinds of machines. Then, when it comes to the environmental and agricultural measures, as I already said previously, we were able to apply these measures in 800 hectares of land out of the 1,250 hectares. We also employed a biodiversity approach in the vineyards with flowers which attract pollinating insects and so on, to try to increase the fertility of the soil as well. And we sowed grass on an ongoing basis around the whole area. This measure was applied to between 90 and 300 hectares, so we still have work to do there, but it was quite successful as a measure as well. Finally, the areas where we applied zero herbicides amounted to 70 hectares out of 1,250. What we hope is that in Luxembourg we'll have a toolbox, or at least as many tools as possible, to help us deal with this very specific situation that we have in each vineyard. You can also see the website for our Wine Growing Association on the screen, and you can see all of the information that I've been describing thus far on that website. There's also a very interesting innovation which is being introduced, which helps us to fight certain diseases. Some of these varieties you might have heard of. Cabernet Blanc is specific to our region. And these varieties have been detected in certain products since 2014. We can see that these are affecting products which are protected, which have a protected destination of origin. And we receive subsidies for this. About 35% of the costs are funded to help us protect these varieties from cryptogamic diseases. We've also started trials with these varieties, and we started doing that since 1992 actually, so it's been about 25 years now. In the beginning, and up to recent times, I have to tell you that people were a bit skeptical about the new varieties. But I can tell you that these varieties are now growing and being used more widely. Our government has decided to promote these kinds of species and to, with a view to reducing the number of pesticides that need to be used. You can see that you can produce good quality wines with classic, which are equivalent to classic grape varieties. But what's interesting to note as well, another speaker was talking about copper earlier, and in the organic sector you need a lot less copper, sometimes no copper at all, because there is very little mildew, or sometimes none. I told you that there were a few obstacles. Firstly, the name of the grape variety is sometimes not very well known by consumers. Our vineyards tend to be mono-variety vineyards, so it's important to know what kind of variety is being used for wines, and when consumers don't know what these grape varieties are, they tend to be a little bit more critical or skeptical of them. But at the same time, you can sell these wines at higher prices, so this sector is developing and we're looking at different avenues for the future. For example, we're also looking at Crémant wines, and that's a very important avenue for the future of Luxembourg wine growing. Just to come back to organic agriculture now, we receive financial support from the CAP. You can see the amounts on the screen now. We have 50 hectares coverage there, so around 4%, which are allocated to these wines. Perhaps it's not a lot, but at the moment, things aren't really progressing a great deal in terms of the number of hectares which are used for organic agriculture. It's a bit stagnant, and that's a shame, but there are reasons for that. Firstly, as I said before, we have more of a maritime climate, if I can describe it that way. I've said 6 kilograms of copper per hectare, that's what's on the screen, and that was the situation in 2016. So you really have to use a lot of copper. And in our region, it's not possible to use potassium phosphonates, so that's problematic for some wine growers. That still needs to be debated. The use of these potassium products can reduce the need for copper use by around 2 kilograms. So in any case, this is something that our farmers are now discussing hotly. And this is seen as an obstacle to the development of organic agriculture. Another obstacle that we have is the fact that a lot of vineyards are planted on terraces, so that makes it difficult to carry out mechanical weed removal. Another important part of our integrated approach has to do with the Wine Growing Institute's policies. We have a centre of wine growing expertise where wine growers can go and ask questions, they can receive training. And together with our research centre and the Organic Agriculture Research Centre as well, these three associations work together very closely to try to promote these new approaches and highlight the results of the research. And this is very important for our farmers, that this information be published on the internet. We regularly have training sessions where we tell people about the results of these new innovations and what they can mean in practice. This is my last slide. And it has to do with the need for research. Of course, when it comes to any chemical substances, the industry needs to carry out a lot of research, and it has the means to do so. But we can see that when it comes to the other pillars of IPM, there's a great need for research and for knowledge sharing as well. In this domain, therefore, as part of our second pillar, we have employed very active policy. For example, the Organic Agriculture Council has provided 100% of the aid for producers, so it's entirely free for them. And it's not only organic farmers, anyone can apply and can take part in this experimentation. They cover 100% of the integrated production. And I've also mentioned here the European Innovation Partnership, which we've established in the field. The idea is to create a study centre, an agricultural study centre, together with a group of farmers who are suffering from a specific problem, to put their heads together and come up with a solution which will then be shared with other farmers. As part of this system, we have offered up to €400,000 per project as a subsidy, and we believe that with this approach that will help us to implement these new practices in the production sector as quickly as possible. We've also introduced aid to decision making, a system for farmers who are bogged down by weather conditions, who are attempting to monitor their farms. We help them through our research centre, and we really try to help them as much as possible to protect their crops. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the next three speakers to be as sharp as quick as they can so that we can get to a discussion. So the first of those is Francois Veillet from Pan Europe on economic modelling in French wine growing and the work of Ecophytio.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of the organisers of this event, and I'd like to thank my colleagues from Pan Europe for their great work. I am here to present a few different initiatives which are taking place in France at the moment in the wine growing sector, in sustainable wine growing, and this is part of the Ecophyto plan in France. So I'm speaking on behalf of the Agricultural Ministry in France, and it's the first time I'm presenting this plan. And the documents that I'm going to show you are official documents, which are accessible online as well. The Eco-Phyto Plan is a national plan for France to reduce pesticides. I'm sure you'll all remember that Article 4 of the directive states that member states need to set a time frame and a calendar and aims for reducing pesticide use, not only for reducing the risks. That's important because earlier we were talking about assessments of national plans, and not all member states have yet set objectives for reducing pesticide use. We don't know what the outcome of the evaluations are going to be yet, but when we look at the current state of play, not all member states have this. They don't all have clear aims for what they want to achieve in their pesticide reduction. In any case, our objectives are to measure how we can achieve our aims. First of all, in France, we decided to have an indicator which is independent of the amount of pesticides used, because when we talk about fungicides, for example, you might need to use a great deal of, for example, Bordeaux mixture, or for other products it might just be a few grams per hectare. So changing the product is an important approach. But we came up with this indicator which is called the NODU in French. It covers all of the standard doses of pesticides which are used on a given area. I won't go into details about the method of calculation. You can consult that if you look up Eco-Phyto later, which is the name of our national plan. Our global pesticide reduction plan has been in place since 2008. So in 2009 we started to see a reduction already. And when we use the NODU indicator, we can see that there was a small reduction in 2012, but then there was an increase of around 20% in the past couple of years, which is not at all a success, it's rather a failure. If you look at the details of the plan, it's rather well thought out. There are funds available for training for farmers and agricultural workers, but these are voluntary provisions, they're not at all binding. So at the moment there's clearly a problem with sharing best practices. Nonetheless, if we put this overall failure to one side, there are several small successes which can be noted on the ground, where farmers are able to use less pesticides, especially the DEFI farms, which are a group of farms which use much fewer pesticides. The aims of these farms are to show that it is possible to use fewer pesticides while maintaining the same levels of economic performance from the crops, and that's very interesting. Nowadays there are around 3,000 farms in France of this kind, and the government's aim is to multiply this number by 10 in the near future, to have 30,000 farms. That's the aim of the ministry, 30,000 farms, and all farmers having a demonstration farm near them where they can go and meet someone who's in the same situation as them and receive training about how to manage their land. So these DEFI, DEPHY farms are a means of demonstrating that the amount of applications of pesticides can be carried out. For wine growing, we have seen a 12% reduction in the number of applications needed, and this is the average, but there are major discrepancies as well. Some farms perform much better than others. In the wine growing sector, these Eco-Phyto farms are all around France. You can see that there's some in the Bordeaux region, some in the south, and others further north. In the west in particular, there's a concentration. All of these farms have different situations, but we can see that in spite of where they are geographically, they've all been able to achieve significant results. If you want more information, you can access the Eco-Phyto PIC website. PIC stands for, well, it's the French for IPM, Integrated Pest Management. You can see what's happening in the different farms on that website, but you can also look at it on a sector-by-sector basis, you can look specifically at the data for the wine-growing sector and see the most significant results. I wanted to share a few examples with you of this French network of farms. In the wine-growing sector, our performance has been quite modest thus far. In the south of France, we were able to reduce by about 21% the number of applications of pesticides, which is quite a modest result, but we do have farms which have been able to reduce a great deal more. They've been able to almost halve the number of pesticides used, so minus 47% of the number of applications of pesticides, using methods and measures such as those which were presented previously in the presentation about the IPM triangle, mechanical methods, but also organic methods, and also this integrated and reasoned approach to the use of chemical products. This is a bit complicated on the next slide, but it intends to show that there are a series of chemical and non-chemical methods available. Some methods have to do with pruning the vine more effectively to prevent the occurrence of diseases. And below that horizontal purple bar on the slide, you can see that it's possible to optimize chemical residues, and the use of weed killers has been eliminated altogether. So I invite you to consult the website to look at the information in more detail, particularly for the Bourgogne region, which was able to reduce its pesticide usage by half. Compared to the regional average, we call this the regional standard, the average is 52%. So that's reduced by half. And these are people who are experimenting. They're not people who are developing new methods, but people who sometimes are subsidized by the National Eco-Phyto Plan, and they are implementing measures that are already available. You can see some very considerable performance results there. Some farms have been able to reduce their pesticide use by 2/3. In the Bordeaux region, they've almost halved the number of fungicides. And these are not necessarily organic farms. So across the board you can see some very interesting results. One farm, which was a vineyard in the Loire region, was able to reduce by 70% their pesticide use. So this is quite remarkable for a vineyard. Now, behind all of these practical examples, you also have regional subsidies. I was explaining to you mainly national results, but there are also agricultural and environmental measures which are funded by the Common Agricultural Policy, the second pillar of the CAP, and these are at regional level, the European Regional Development Plans. There's a series of measures that can be taken in the regions of France, and each region, of course, has its own plan as well for rural development and regional development, and it lists a number of measures that it wants to take. But we can see, in any case, that the European Union has played a very important role by asking member states to set a time frame for pesticide reduction and implement measures. And thus far, these environmental measures and climate measures have been taken up, and that's going to help every region to achieve its results. These DEFI farms also have a more experimental branch. We like our acronyms in France, so I'm afraid you're seeing a lot of acronyms on the screen. But there are 41 what we call DEFI XB projects. These are experimental farms where we work together with researchers, and they're from the public sector in France, and these researchers develop new measures for combating pests, for example. You can see on the right that for the wine sector, we have in light green the 3/4 or over 70% of farms that have been able to reduce their use of pesticides. And this is quite a considerable figure. Some other sectors have achieved significant results as well, whereas others have been more modest. This is for the south of France. You can see on the left the amounts that certain pesticides have been reduced, some 10%, 12%, and some of these are organic farms, of course, but not all of them. Some of the aims which were set by these farms were also very high. There's also the Pesticide Action Network Europe, an NGO that we work with, and in future, I'm the director of an agency that would like to continue working with Pan-Europe, because we are seeing the results on the ground in all of the regions of our country. We're seeing that we can reduce pesticides significantly without harming the profitability of companies. That's not the last word, of course. There are further measures which need to be developed and research needs to be carried out. But the question for the future is, are other wine growers going to join in? And are these best practices going to be shared? Currently, these measures are not binding, so how can we encourage all farmers to adopt these same practices? There are several avenues we can explore. We can look at taxing retailers, setting objectives for them as well, introducing certificates for phytosanitary products, and also encouraging farmers to reach energy targets. But it's a challenge for all of us, which we need to rise to. We need to carry out research into development, but there are also thousands of farms which are already implementing these measures and which are able to reduce their pesticide use a great deal, even halve it in some cases, by using integrated pest management. It will make it easier, therefore, to standardise this across France. We believe that these practices can be made more universal. So how can we collect more information on what's happening in our country? If you want to know more, you can consult the Eco-Phyto Plan and the following websites on the screen. Thank you.
Okay, we move on because I also have to be fair to the next session. So we'll move on now to the third speaker, or the second of this group of speakers, and that's Damiano Livecchi on Italy, please. Thank you.
Grazie, innanzitutto.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to thank everyone involved in organising this event. Thank you very much for inviting me to give you a presentation on the IPM grape growing in Italy. This is a system which has been in place since January 2016, and it is in addition to the integrated production system we had in Italy. And it enables us to actually optimise agricultural production through the identification of the product in the whole production system. It also enables us to encourage producers to actually get involved in the integrated production circuit, and also raises awareness amongst consumers of such practices. The system was designed to be compatible with agricultural and environmental measures that are contained in the CAP, those that are financed under rural development, and those that are financed through the single CMO. This system simplifies administration and the checks that need to be carried out. The system came into force in 2011. A quality system was established, and this defined integrated production. The definition of integrated production refers to production with a significant reduction of the use of synthetic products to treat plant diseases. Therefore, a reduced use of fertilizers. And that is important from a toxicological point of view. So that's what we mean by integrated production. Then there was a decree in 2014 which provided more details as to how the system would be established, and the system came into effect last year. The integrated production system provides a definition of national guidelines, and these guidelines define the basic measures for phytosanitary defence and also for the land use. It also indicates admissible activities in the domain of plant protection products. It aims to govern production in a way that is in line with the centrally agreed upon production methods. Farmers can sign up to the quality system as single producers or as a group, i.e. a consortium or other ensemble. Online applications can be made. So all you have to do is you have to connect to the national centralised system and make a request. A request can also be submitted at the regional agricultural centres that have been working on providing farmers with assistance for years. So this is a very simple system and is pretty well known in the world of agriculture. In addition to the producers, distributors and others can sign up, including processors. There are certain environmental and agricultural measures that have to do with rural development within the CMO, and there are quality systems which are recognised at a regional level, which enable a better application of the provisions detailed in the Sustainable Use Directive. There is a two-tier system of checks, and once production has been approved in all the different phases in the integrated production system, there is a label that you can see up there on the slide, which can then be put on the packaging of the product that is then put on the market. So I said that we have a system of checks, it's a two-tier system. There's also a self-checking system within the companies, and there is a certification system as well. And this requires all of the different activities to be promptly registered. So that includes the purchase of the products, and then the use of the products, and the use of different machinery. Processors and distributors are involved here as well. And of course, we want to ensure that there is full traceability throughout the production chain. The certification measures here seek to verify all of the different companies involved, 100% of the operators who have signed up to the system. There's an annual check, and there's also residual checks on the products. So what are the opportunities that this system affords? Well, one of the opportunities here is that we can actually make consumers aware of the existence of integrated production methods, and therefore this label acts as a guarantee in terms of the production method, and also it contributes to the rolling out of this production method. Otherwise, this method would not get the airtime it deserves. So that is just to give you a brief overview of what I was saying before. So, in addition to producers, distributors can also sign up. And you can see here that all of the different stakeholders in the chain can use the label. But if only the producer signs up to the system, so not the distributor, then the final product can not obtain the label. It could be in the producer's interest to sign up to the system because, as I said before, this was designed to manage CAP aid through the CMO and through rural development aid. Therefore, signing up to the system could actually turn out to be a big plus for producers, above and beyond the obligations they have to meet to receive subsidies. And just to provide you with all the information, I have shown here up on the screen all the different the limitations and the different limit values, which are determined at national level, not regional level. Now, how do we use community funds in Italy? How are they used? Looking at integrated production, 7% of the rural development budget for the 2014-2020 period is earmarked for measures 3 and 10 for integrated agriculture. And 12% of the expenditure per annum under the fruit CMO is used to support integrated production. I haven't added the figures for organic farming, but as one of the previous speakers said, there is a large number of a lot of land is used in Italy for wine production. That's 10,000 hectares, and the budget for rural development was used for measure 11, so organic farming. This slide gives you an overview of the chain that I was referring to before. I would just like here to stress how the system can benefit the management of community aid, and it can also help final producers because it enables the product to stand out because you can apply a certain label to it. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. There is a website which is shown up there on the screen. On that website you can access all of the information I've referred to today. You can learn more about how we manage the system, and there is even a brief tutorial which explains how you can interact with the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll go to the last speaker in this session, and that's David Carey from IBMA, who is, according to me, has to make a short statement. So brevity is a good thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I will keep it brief. And I haven't got any slides, so that's a good start. But last week, 7 years ago, I took up the role as the first executive director of IBMA, a very young organisation with a lot of aspiration. Its founding members had a vision back in 1995 when it was born of a different form of agriculture, a true green revolution. Like the first green revolution, it involved producing healthy crops to feed a growing world population. However, in contrast to the first green revolution, this one is and was truly green. It engages in an agriculture that is green not only in producing plentiful harvestable yields, but in totality, including the interactions with the environment and the human population. Such a change would never happen without innovative people looking at what nature has to offer and working with it. Such a change to truly sustainable agriculture would not gain traction without passionate people prepared to challenge the status quo. Such a change would not occur without policymakers making brave and informed choices and placing the benefits to society, farmers, SMEs and the environment first. We now are finalising revised and appropriate criteria for low-risk PPPs in the Standing Committee, as our colleague from DG Sante pointed out before. We have commitment from our European Parliament ENVI Committee, who last week voted 59-1 for a motion that calls for procedures to be delivered within 2 years, outside of the refit process, for accelerating the regulatory processes of low-risk plant protection products. Sincere thanks go to the strength of commitment of Herbert Dorfman, Pavel Poch and their team, Gerling, Rees, Boylan, Stace, Evie, and Dorno, who all co-sponsored across the political divide a motion that will be going through the plenary session in the next week or two. Next week, Commissioner Andriukaitis should be able to inform us of how DG Sante intend to accomplish what hopefully the whole Parliament will endorse to enable us to truly implement IPM and bring low-risk plant protection products to European farmers quicker. Such a change would never happen without farming organisations like Copa Cogeca accepting that the old style of agriculture can no longer guarantee the produce together with the health of the population and the farms themselves. That part of the environment for which the farmer is a very willing custodian for future generations. I am at the point, dare I say it, because you always pinch yourself before you say things like this, where I can see we will soon commence filling the farmer's toolbox at a sensible rate with modern, innovative tools sensitive to the environment and human health, regulated in a way proportionate to the risk that they pose and benefit to all. Our chairman here, Michael Hamill, always asks us, we all see this need and we want the change, but why is it not happening? Finally, this year, I hesitate, but believe it is now safe in saying, Mr. Chair, that the seeds have been sown and the crop is germinating, which will bring tools allowing IPM to truly blossom. The hard work, though, is only just beginning. And I say this to DG Sante and the Commission in general, that IBMA will be there to help when this is being developed. We will be a willing participant in bringing these things through, because it's been a dream that we've had for a long time to make these tools fully available. So, Mr. Chair, that's my brief comment.
Thank you. I want to throw this open to discussion, because what I've listened to very carefully has been a Commission statement of renewed interest in a directive for which it has responsibility. I'd like that to be teased out a little further, but if you're the questioners, I'm simply the moderator. Presentation from Luxembourg on the detail of how you operate within a rural development programme. From France, insofar as the ambition is concerned, and from Italy, insofar as the work it's doing driving forward the process in respect of the wine sector. Now, we do have about 40 sectors, and this is my 5th year, I think, to be chairman. So on the basis that you'll keep me as chairman, I have a job for another 40 years or so, and I'm quite happy to do it for 40 years, if there's progress. And the suggestion is that there is progress. But, I don't know, call me a reprobate or something. Let's see, in your questions, can you tease out, are we making progress or where are the blockages? Because, as you said rightly, this has been your first opportunity to meet stakeholders in a renewed commitment by the Commission, which I think the feeling of this meeting for the last 4 years has been not much commitment by the Commission. Now, having said that and got that off my chest and knowing that my pension will be reduced, let me ask some questions, offer some questions. And DG Agri is here and will take part in the debate as they see fit. So, who wants to start? And I'm going to give 10 minutes even though we're behind times. Sir.
Good afternoon. Gregor Cooper, Mineral for Farming. I have a question for Monsieur Villaret. You understand English or better French? Okay. I have a question. The impressive results in wines of reduction in pesticides, is there a link between reduced use of chemical input and quality of the produce produced? Thank you.
Hold on. We're going to take 4 questions. Yeah.
Sì, buonasera, Francesca Riccardi.
Good afternoon, Francesca Riccardi. I'm from the Veneto region. I have a question that's been passed to me by a colleague who is following the event online. I'm going to ask the question in French. It's for the speaker from Luxembourg. So my colleague asks, you said that you use resistant varieties for PDOs, but if you look at the regulation, it's actually not allowed. You can only use resistant varieties. So can you use these resistant varieties for PDOs? That's the question. That's what we'd like to know in the Veneto region.
Okay, next question. I'll take a third one now. You're all satisfied?
If I may, Massimo Toni, I'm here for the French group de Sangos, involved in biocontrol. IBMA is a biocontrol, International Biocontrol Manufacturers Association. I heard the word biocontrol here today once by Monsieur Villeret after 1 hour and 30 minutes. I think that we should emphasize also globally the role that the biocontrol tools have served in obtaining the results that were evoked. And I think that this applies not only to viticulture. We heard about organic viticulture. We heard about reduction in copper. Actually, copper is not a biocontrol product, but there are a lot of biocontrol solutions that are being brought to the market in areas such as row crops, vegetable production, fruit trees, and so on, and not only viticulture. But I think this should be emphasized a bit more, And perhaps David could elaborate on that across the European spectrum.
Okay. 3 rounds of questions. First one is certainly to France. Well, you can all answer these questions as long as you're brief.
Yeah, I keep it short. Oui, je vais répondre en français.
I will answer in French, it'll be more precise. Yes, all of the producers seek to attain a high quality, because if they don't produce a high quality wine, they're not going to be able to sell it. So there are 3 objectives. 1, reduce pesticides. 2, keep a good yield. And 3, high quality. Those are the 3 objectives.
Varieties.
Oui, en fait, c'est...
Yes. These varieties have a certain classification, which means that we avoid any problems. So it's not limited to PDOs. Perhaps I wasn't clear enough. It's authorised for PDOs. So Luxembourg vineyards, well, we don't have any producers that are not members of our group.
Okay, and the third one, which was partly a statement, but nevertheless, biocontrol tools.
Yeah, thanks. Massimo, that's certainly was what was intended through my talk, was that I was talking a lot about these biocontrol tools that are coming, but the second part of this agenda, where we've got some biocontrol examples and companies are going to take that on. So I'll wait for that, but certainly that's the basis around which this whole organisation of this symposium is there, to show that these tools are available to be used within the IPM system.
Other questions, other comments in this session? Well, I think you've been very gentle with the Commission. Commission, tell me, you have a renewed interest in the directive, and that interest comes following a period of, I think, disinterest, a report not completed for over 2.5 years now, a report due in 2018 on this subject, which, from your comments, you seem to put a lot of emphasis on, with most of the work done this year. Can you tell us a little bit about the process that you're going through? Can you also tell us how you see IPM? Because let me, just in case you want to go away early, let me remind you that there were a series of recommendations out of this conference last year, and there were 4 of them. First of all, this conference discussed in suggesting to the European Parliament members here to do an own initiative report on the implementation of the directive. I recall in my time working for the Commission that the Parliament was well able to do that on the directive I was responsible for, causing some inconvenience, but driving on implementation. The second one, that the Commission develop a roadmap to IPM. There was a third one that came out of the discussion, and that was that the industry prepare a visionary approach for 2020, 2025, what they see as the potential. And thirdly and finally, that the NGOs, if they could find some loot, might prepare a league table of crops, whatever type of crops, that had the worst performance. They were the things that emerged. Now, they're all important things from the viewpoint of sustainable agriculture, but one of them in particular is of extreme importance, and that is that the Commission prepare its vision of a roadmap to IPM. So maybe you could take this opportunity of responding, even if it's a year late, because this was last year. But I didn't see any response since. So.
Thank you. First of all, it's not that there was a lack of interest in the directive per se. It was a lack of resource. I mean, we are all experiencing this sort of problem, and this was at the basis. What is changing now is probably that we are facing on a daily basis political and technical discussion on the actual implementation of the plant protection products. So we have a number of outstanding issues from glyphosate, from endocrine disruptors, and we believe that it's time now to engage more into another narrative on pesticide. I mean, this directive is, in our view, the way forward. And we would like also to see the member states taking advantage of all the opportunities that are provided by this directive, and we are there to support them. In which way? The process is very simple. First of all, we have already the national action plans. I think that there is an obligation to review them after 5 years, but nevertheless, we send this questionnaire. We are asking member states to tell us what new has happened in the last few years. Most importantly, as I say, we go on the spot. We made a selection of member states we are going to visit and to see what the situation is. And what we believe the situation is that competent authority in member state like very much prescriptive solution. So we have already seen other policy area where we give member state a margin of flexibilities, or they seems to be in a certain degree of difficulties. So what we would like to do now is to take in stock of what's happening in the member state, bringing them together in different forums, identify the best practice, and normally in other situations we indeed eventually manage to do some sort of guidelines that were available and followed by the member state. So this is the process itself, and I think that in part is responding to this recommendation done last year, but also we are also following very closely the activity in the Council. As you know, during the Dutch presidency there was a working group working on sustainable use of direct, in particular low-risk pesticide and IPM, and we are very much committed in being involved in that, as I say, up to the possibility of setting up some guidance or guidelines.
Just on that the work of the Sustainable Agriculture Group has been very much appreciated by industry, and how that is calling for things. It has been very ambitious with a 40-point implementation plan, but there is a limited life of that group. What have the Commission got in plan to make sure that that continues after this period where it's been extended for a limited amount of time, but will it be able to continue further? Because there are still going to be, I think, a lot of those action items in that implementation plan that still need to be completed after that's finished.
To be honest, I cannot reply exactly to your question, so I will... yeah.
I think I'm going to draw that session to a close. Thank you very much to each and every one of the speakers. Sorry. briefly.
Sarò brevissimo.
I will be very brief. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. My name is Stefano Cinti. I work at DG Agri. I deal with national support programmes for the wine sector. And I would just like to add one thing here to the debate. We have talked an awful lot about the second pillar, and I would just like to draw your attention to the fact that there are first pillar funds. In particular, these are funds that come from the wine CMO, and there are 16 countries that have a national programme with an allocated budget. We're talking here about 1.1 billion euros per annum. And there's a whole raft of measures available here which are quite market focused, because that's the legislative slant. But I wanted just to draw your attention to the fact that two of these measures can actually have implications, and they do link in here to phytosanitary health and the use of phytosanitary products. You have certain relocation funds that are available for the relocation of a vineyard, and there are others that have to do with restructuring of the vineyard as a whole. So that links into phytosanitary issues. And then there's innovation. So obviously this is quite a new branch. This is something that the Parliament was very much behind. And this branch is now operational, and the money can be used for the development, I think that's really the right word to use. It's the development of new technologies and new procedures. And this doesn't only look at the cellar stage, but also looking at innovation in the field, in the growing of the grapes. So funds are available for innovation and the development of new techniques and new defence techniques as well. So I'd like to, having said that, thank you very much for inviting me along to this meeting. It's very timely, I think, because, as I'm sure you well know, we are working on the new Common Agricultural Policy. And there is an online consultation that's open currently and will be open until May. There will be a hearing in July on the results of this consultation. There is an impact assessment that is currently ongoing, with an eye on sustainability, of course. And by the end of the year, there will be a Commission communication, and next year a legislative proposal will be made. Thank you very much, and all the best moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you. You're also in the school of happy people, which is always nice to see in Commission officials. Okay, we'll finish that session, and we'll move straight on to the next session. The next session actually deals with sustainable wine growing. So we have three speakers, Carlo Dusso, we have Kirsten Frohle, and Christina Carlos. And if the three of you come, we can go straight away to, I think, what's essentially practical aspects of grape production insofar as IPM is concerned, insofar as biodiversity is concerned, and insofar as more functional biodiversity is concerned. So let's begin straight away, Carlo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Plant
protection problems in vineyards and integrated pest management. So we can see that in the 70s, IPM moved the first steps, and at that time the main problems were represented by berry moths and downy mildew, and the response by growers was an intense use of insecticides, in particular organophosphates, but also carbamates against pests, and of fungicides, especially dithiocarbomates against diseases. And the pesticide application number reached 25 in certain cases per year, with concerns for toxicological and environmental effects. And last but not least, new problems arose at that time, and in particular, outbreaks of spider mites and leafhoppers. IOBC is the International Organization for Biological Control, so it promotes biological control but also integrated pest management. The first meetings of a specific working group, so-called IPM in viticulture, the first meetings were organized in the 70s, and at that time the main topics were monitoring economic thresholds of pests, natural control of pests and first attempts at biological control, sex pheromones in particular to control berry moths, side effects of pesticides on natural enemies, and the impact of agronomic practices on pests and diseases. This is a picture of the first European symposium, not of the symposium, but of a few participants, Italian participants, to the first European symposium on IPM in viticulture, Isola d'Elba in Italy, the seaside, you can see, and the first attempts to produce handbooks of IPM in viticulture. In the 80s, the European Commission, as well Member States, supported the first projects on IPM in viticulture, and some results were as follows: mating disruption that now accounts for more than 230,000 hectares in Europe, pointed out of models and decision support systems in forecast and manage pests and diseases. The biological control of spider mites by predatory mites, and identification and management of vectors of grey yellows, in particular Flavescens doré and Bois noir. These case studies represent a good result of how it's possible to reduce chemical application in vineyards. In the last IOBC meetings, we obtained additional good results. I mean, more sustainable techniques of mating disruption against berry moths, the identification of environmental factors and cultural practices affecting the abundance of emerging pests, I mean Drosophila suzuki and Planococcus ficus in particular, but also other species, advances in the knowledge of vectors of grey yellows, but also viruses, and related to plant diseases, the evaluation of grape varieties resistant to mildews, both mildews, new findings on the role of biocontrol agents and endophytic microorganisms, and last, progress in the studies on ISCA complex and more in general grapevine trunk diseases. IPM works with nature. This is the title of an exhibition organized by IOBC IBMA, PNA in 2015. The scopes were within the 11 posters presented at various locations, what IPM means, how Sustainable Use Directive can be implemented. Biocontrol agents and tools should be made according to good agronomic practice, should be combined so. And finally, the most important message is that there are agricultural models with low impact but ensuring safe food. And an example is here. This is the approach to implement IPM practices. According to the 4 main pillars: agronomic practice, monitoring, physical methods, biocontrol, and only at the last chance, last option, pesticides, selective pesticides. And 2 examples regarding vineyards, the control of Lobesia botrana and the control of powdery mildew. In the first case, we can use mating disruption, DSS, and Bacillus thuringiensis to obtain a safe control of berry moths, consuming much less pesticides. And in particular, mating disruption is the attempt to interrupt communication between males and females, and commercial formulations of pheromones mimic the natural chemical blends of females, so male confusion is the result of ambient pheromone concentrations that are sufficient to hide the trails of calling females. We can say that these concentrations are more or less nanograms per cubic meter. A second option is represented by models and decision support systems to obtain a more precise timing for applying biocontrol tools, such as Bacillus thuringiensis. New formulates are available on the market now and are effective at the same level of conventional insecticides, as this graph represents clearly. The second example is the control of powdery mildew. We can integrate DSS, resistant varieties, biocontrol agents, and pruning, obtaining very good results and consuming much less pesticides. Finally, which new developments can be expected in the future activity of research in IPM and viticulture? One of the most interesting topics is functional diversity, enhancing botanical biodiversity in and near vineyards. In fact, produces positive effects on the natural control of pests, but evidence is still limited and mechanisms poorly explored. So we can do more research on this topic. Second, new insights on the compatibility between pesticides and biocontrol agents, but also pollinators, in conventional, but also in organic vineyards, where pyrethrum is frequently used. Third, management of invasive species. Aleomorpha alis is a good example of new scenarios in European viticulture. Management of emerging pests like Ephestia in southern regions, in a framework of climate change, and new tools For instance, multiple species dispensers to control berry moths and mealybugs, and solutions are needed to implement the Sustainable Use Directive. Regarding diseases, more investigations on the genetic diversity of downy powdery mildews and the occurrence of strains breaking the resistance, but also development of strategies to control both diseases in resistant cultivars according to resistance level and climatic conditions. And quite important to monitor the status of secondary diseases in this framework. A recent project, a EU project, so-called PURE, has analyzed the most innovative tools to manage pests and diseases in vineyards. And these results were very promising and show that it is possible to use less pesticides in viticulture. However, additional studies are needed to address old and new problems. So, without research, reducing the dependence on pesticides is still a longer and winding road. Thank you.
Thank you, and for your extremely clear message in your last slide, not least. So, let's go to the second presentation, Making Biodiversity and Grape Growing Work for Farmers, by Kerstin Frohle. Kerstin.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Kerstin Frohle. I'm working for the Lake Constance Foundation. It's a nature protection organization in the south of Germany. And I want to present today, can I have the presenter? Oh, sorry. I want to present today some ideas of how we think it could be worked that farmers get more involved to do some biodiversity measurements. I skipped this slide. So we started in the middle of 2050 a project called Partnership for Biodiversity Protection in Viticulture in Europe, and it's co-funded by the Erasmus program of the European Union. And we have three main goals where we want to work on. The first one is to raise awareness among the farmers for the issue of the loss of biodiversity. We want to adapt wine growing practices to protect and promote biodiversity in the vineyards. But we also want to reach some improvements of biodiversity performance beyond farm level. And when I'm saying we, then it's, the partnership consists of a group of 8 organizations. And we more or less can be divided between, the half of more or less our nature protection organizations, whereas the others are Farmer Association of Viticulturists. We also have an organic agrarian company, and ADWIT, which is also a farmer association developing wine growing in the Douro region, and I'm sure Christina will tell more about it later on. So the idea of the partnership is that we all have knowledge and experiences collected over the years, and we want to share these experiences to produce something in common which may really help the farmers for getting along with the biodiversity issue. And the second positive effect is if we have partners like the Farmers Association on board, then we are not on a scale of a pilot project, so we do not reach only 10 farmers, but we can reach several hundred. And the persons working in the project can just pass on their knowledge to the farmers. So in shortly, I want to explain what we want to do, or what we are doing now is the first product we are going to produce is a biodiversity fact sheet, which is we shortly want to explain what biodiversity is, but then mainly focus on why it is important, what is the benefit of doing biodiversity actions. And the second half of this fact sheet is focused on good examples. I experienced in the last years that persons are always interested in what the others are doing, and if they had good examples to tell, if they have positive results, if they can tell benefits, then others are also interested in doing the same. That's why we focus also on presenting some good examples. The second tool for raising awareness is, where we're working at the moment, is the identification guide. The aim is to show that wine growers, that not all animal and plant which may occur on or around the area are harmful or bad. So the idea is to present the farmers a kind of guide, and we agreed to focus on beneficials. Our initial idea was to focus on endangered species, but then the farmers, which we have also on board, said, well, it would be more helpful if we just change the scope and go further on beneficials. So we changed it, and I have to say it's not the real guide, because we do not explain all the animals and plants occurring around the farm. It would be too big, because we also wanted to have a practical format so the farmer can take it in the pocket or in the car within the field and just have a small look. We present the most common species, also explain why it is important, and also we put on some icons where we tell the farmers with which measures it's possible to support the species. The next level we are gaining is the biodiversity check. So here we are going really deep within the farmer. We are checking or analyzing the impacts of a winery on biodiversity, and we are doing this not just only in the vineyard, but also during the whole wine producing process. So we're looking how biodiversity is implemented in the strategy, in the thoughts of the farmer. Of course, looking in the vineyard, but also going to the cellar, to bottling, to sales, and also to marketing. So if farmers are really good in doing some biodiversity measures, then they also should tell it in different kinds of ways. And that's we are going to look at. So we have developed, or in Germany it's already developed. We are going to adapt this in the different countries. An interview guide, we are discussing, talking to the farmers, also doing some visits, and afterwards the farmers are getting a report where we shortly summarize our findings, the situation, but also talk about positive, negative effects, and if really needed, we are giving some recommendations. And so the farmers will have and feedback on its own individual biodiversity performance. And I also have to add that this biodiversity check is not a certificate or label, so the farmers cannot say afterwards, oh, I've done the check, so I'm good now. And it's also not going into this detail that it supplements a biodiversity impact assessment. With all the recommendations and all the measures, the good ones, already implemented, we are going further on and developing a kind of biodiversity program, which is nothing more than a catalog of different measures separate into the different areas of wine producing. We described goals, we described the measures, but also put in some indicators. And the idea is that the farmer can have kind of help on good ideas which they might implement, but also they can do a kind of self-check. It's thought that they just can put in or sign in the measures they already implemented, but also to think about what they want to do in the next few years, so they can have a kind of management tool concerning biodiversity. We, in the middle of the project, The first 2 points concerning awareness raising, we already have finished. If you like to have more information, we have some products brought, so you can have it over there. The other 2 points we are working at the moment, and we are trying to adapt all the ideas to the partners in Spain, Portugal, and Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we go to Portugal and to Cristina Carlos, who is going to talk about functional biodiversity in wine growing.
Thank you, Michael. Je voudrais remercier tout d'abord à l'organisation.
Firstly, I'd like to thank you. Thank you to this organisation for inviting me here to tell you what ADVID is doing on behalf of the country of Portugal in its particular region.
Alors, ADVID est une...
So, ADVID is a private organisation. It has around 170 wine growers in the association. And the region that we are working in is this region on the screen here in the north of Portugal. We have around 43,000 hectares of vineyards, 36,000 of which are steeply sloping. So this is a terrain that's very difficult to manage and has very high production costs. Therefore, we play a technical assistance role, and we're also involved in research to try to ensure that our wine is granted its true value. We are a port-producing region, and we also have the Douro wine that we produce, which has an increasingly better and better reputation, and I invite you to try it as soon as you possibly can. As I said to you before, we have about 170 wine growers in our association. We manage an area which mainly uses integrated production methods, and we have about 300 hectares of organic agriculture. Our location is a region with a high concentration of farms which have a high natural value. Portugal is one of the countries with the highest number of indigenous varieties of grape. We've studied which varieties are the most sensitive and the most resistant to diseases and to pests as well. And we have also committed to protecting this genetic heritage. We are linked to an association which is called Porvid, which is based in Lisbon. And we safeguard all of these varieties so that they can be used later on if need be. Part of this region was classified by UNESCO in 2001. That's because of the landscape and our cultivation methods. It's been classified as a lively and developing cultivation area. And we also have, in comparison with other wine producing regions in Europe, we have a high quantity of non-crop habitats. In addition to the vineyards, we have a lot of environmental structures that can contribute to functional biodiversity. So we are trying to protect indigenous vegetation which grows around the slopes and benefits the vineyards in terms of creating biodiversity. There is also a lot of woodland in the nearby area, and I can also tell you that we are in a region which, because of its number of slopes, has a high risk of erosion. That's why at ADVID we are trying to promote grass sowing around the vines, and we are also putting in place a system which allows for mechanical checks to be carried out, which means that we can avoid the use of herbicides in the area. Here are a few photos of the area. Unfortunately, the weather conditions also have a heavy, significant impact. And from June to September, we had quite a dry season. We haven't had much precipitation. We have also committed to planting other species in addition to the vineyards so that we can stimulate biodiversity. In terms of the key pests that we have, there's the grapevine moth and the green leafhopper. ADVID also works together with universities such as the Villarreal University, and we've developed a research program to find out what the main predators are, the main predators of grapevine moths, firstly, and we've published a few reports on that topic. What we found out was that the presence of parasitoids is also very significant in our region. We therefore developed a strategy for biological control, using auxiliary insects, and our aim was to provide key environmental resources according to a habitat management strategy. We also wanted to make sure that there was a limited and selective use of pesticides. The high diversity of the flora in the region in the future will also support the significant diversity of these auxiliary insects. We considered the needs for shelter, nectar, and so on, different alternatives, because these are required by the insects. Our flora is very diverse in the region, and we worked with these different projects, Ecovitis, Biodivine, Floresta Común, and a partnership that Christina, I believe, mentioned earlier on. We have an EDGE project which involves drying out hedges and inserting them into the area. And we also encourage wine growers to protect the flora that grows naturally on the slopes. Here's an example of a hedge that was planted in 2013, and also to protect natural resources, the natural species which grow around the vineyards. As Carlo Duso mentioned previously, ADVID has also played a significant role in the development of decision-making models. We have tried to produce these models for grape worms and other insects. We're also trying to do the same thing now for diseases and for treatment methods. And we also want to select a list of these pesticides which are authorized for IPM. Strangely enough, between 1997 and 2013, the government made a selection. It drew up a list ranking different pesticides according to their toxicity. These are pesticides that were authorized, and I can give you an example here of some insecticides which were used, and these were authorized for a certain disease. We have 0 pyrethroids which were applied. But funnily enough, in 2014, with the implementation of the National Action Plan. Other insecticides were authorised for farmers. Even if they're not recommended, they are available on the list and they can be used. We have a few that we don't recommend to farmers now, but unfortunately and strangely enough, they can be used because they're recommended for grapevine moth. So we could continue discussing that later if you're interested. As Carlo Duso also said, the availability of these insecticides can lead to a negative impact on fauna, on animal life later on. And they can also have a negative impact on the environmental structures next to and around the vines. They can also lead to outbreaks of secondary pests, such as mites, mealbugs, and other types of grasshoppers, for example. Thank you very much.
Okay. I have been asked to finish this conference at 6:15, and I will finish this conference at 6:15. That requires, if you have questions now for the three speakers, now is your chance. While you're asking any questions, could the three speakers for the next session come up, and can I ask the three speakers to have a real sharp presentation each of about 7 minutes, and then we'll be up to time. So, any questions? No? Okay, let's go to the next session straight away. Yeah, one question. Sorry, one question you have.
Je pense que je peux en français, ça va?
I can ask a question in French, can't I? Yes, you can, sir. Well, I think there are problems within the EU in terms of the use of phytosanitary products. Most of the countries approve phytosanitary products, but not necessarily for use on leaves. And I think there is a great potential here for reducing the use of such products, because it makes a big difference whether you put it on 3 leaves or 1,000 leaves. So I think there is an opportunity here. It doesn't cost anything to the producers at all. It's just all about making good calculations. Thank you.
C'est juste un commentaire.
That's just a comment, I believe. Yes, I completely agree with you. Well, yes, I just wanted to put it out there, because we see it as a problem. Well, there's phylloxera. Okay, we need to actually put the focus on functional biodiversity. And this is something that we're working on very intently at ADVID. Olivier participated in an event that we organised in Douro, and there are many different systems across the member states. And we have all of these terraces, we have very steep slopes. The surfaces are very different in terms of their makeup, so that's definitely a challenge for us. But I think the point you had to make there was a very interesting one. Thank you.
Okay, can the next speakers come? Thank you very much. Thank you each very much for that presentation. They were extremely good. Now, the next speakers, we're going to start while they're walking up. So, we have 3 speakers. We're dealing with when companies are engaging in sustainable wine growing. That's the overall title. 3 speakers. The first is Ivo Nardi from Veneto, and he's going to speak about taking a chance in the market. So, Ivo, you're going to speak about taking a chance in the market, and you're going to be short and sharp.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Pan Europe for inviting us here today. I'd like to also thank the European Parliament. So, very briefly, I will try and give you an overview of my 32 years of experience in organic farming. I am from Veneto, a region in the northeast of Italy. It's where we produce Prosecco, one of the most famous sparkling wines in the world. We've got about 30,000 hectares of vineyards, so that means that quite a lot of pesticide is used. of course, we produce Prosecco, but we also produce other grape varieties. So it all started for us in 1985. We're a family business, and we currently have 120 hectares of land. And all of this land is given over to organic production. And we actually export quite a lot of our product as well. I'll talk about that later. So what is our philosophy here when it comes to organic farming? We use a lot of organic compost. Studies were carried out and they led us to have a better understanding of how we could best use the limited space we have at our disposal, and how we can also ensure a very high quality product over time. So we put the focus on actually having a balance in the vineyard ecosystem. So this was, of course, no easy task. We started in 1985, but back then there wasn't much documented experience for us to draw on. So we had to think of our own alternatives to the use of chemical products. So we tried out a very large range of products along with others elsewhere in Europe, and over time this led to the emergence of agreements that were then approved internationally in 1993. We tested copper products, but also coadjuvants, bentonites, and a whole raft of secondary elements. When we started back in 1985, there wasn't really a well-defined market. So we had to really look at building everything from scratch. But then in 1990 through to 1995, BioFac was established, which enabled us to develop and cultivate an interest in organic products in Germany to begin with. So we were one of the companies that spearheaded this whole project, and we saw that there was a growing interest amongst consumers for organic products. The German market was a real boon for us in terms of our exports, and it also encouraged us to be as innovative as possible in our production methods. Coming towards 2000, a small market began to emerge in Italy. There was a series of cooperatives, a whole raft of cooperatives and distributors that got together to work on this. A national network of specialised organic shops also came to light. We were working specifically on the way that we work the vineyard with new machines and looking at how we can optimize the technology that we use. Between 2000 and 2005, well, this was a fantastic period for us. We saw great developments, and that's because of the emergence of the UK market. In the UK market, you didn't have small shops, small organic shops. You just had these large-scale retailers. We were also developing food safety certificates and looking at how we could further streamline our production methods and provide certain guarantees for large-scale retailers so that they would never be out of stock. We were looking at biodynamic issues throughout the entire company, but wanted to make sure that we held on to our market niche. Between 2005 and 2010, the commercial development started to become more significant, and we needed to increase the amount of available land for organic production. We called in technical experts to enable us to adhere to the production standards, and also to improve our organic production system, and this was of fundamental importance. So having technical experts on hand to train us, that was of key importance, and that's still valid today. In this 2005 to 2010 period, there was growing interests from the Dutch and Scandinavian markets. This meant that we had to change our mechanism somewhat, and now it's the market that is actually exercising pressure on the supply of organic products, and that's obviously having an effect on producers. From 2010 to 2015 now, one of the key issues that was broached before was that of copper reduction, and we are continuing our product trials, and this is pretty much in line with the tables that we saw in a previous presentation, looking at 4 kilograms per hectare per year, but we think that we can make significant improvements there, with obviously a view to being copper free in the future. Market pressures had an impact on us, of course, in terms of performance. You have the US market, the Australian market, the Canadian market, and we've seen a real boom in demand on those markets. But of course you have to look at the link up between market demand and the available space, and this has an impact on the cost of the grape. And of course we are trying to, insofar as possible, satisfy market demand. Between 2015 and 2020 we are looking at developing innovative techniques looking at resistant vines, resistant to diseases. We're looking at useful secondary organisms and other coadjuvants, and these can actually help us to optimize vine management. This is not only linked to treatment, to copper treatment, but also to developing a more robust ecosystem. Our company is continuing to grow. In 2016 we grew by 18%. This gives you an idea of the demand out there for organic produce. In the US there were a few people interested in organic produce, but now we're actually seeing more of an interest emerging in central US states. So a growing number of people are interested. And this decision to actually prioritize organic products is something that is certainly growing in these markets. And for young people especially, organic produce is a key issue. And these people are actually choosing organic products wherever they are available. So in terms of growth, there's still a great deal of potential out there. I'll conclude just by talking about a few figures. In our very brief history, we have been able to save over 50 tons of pesticide. So I think when you look at it from that perspective, it's certainly worth the effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know, I'm getting the feeling of big progress all day today, and your 50 tons is very welcome, as was your presentation. So let's go to the second one, the business model of CBC Europe by Vittorio Veronelli. Vittorio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everybody. I think I So I'll try to give you an overview of the business model that our company has developed. You see our logo is BioGuard, and biological first is the slogan, so it tells something. But before we enter into the specific, I'd like to borrow a slide that belongs to our association, the International Biological Manufacturers Association, that is explaining our 3B approach. What I say is biocontrol industry is developing products and strategy to control pest and disease by studying their biology and their behavior to achieve the smartest and most robust result with the highest sustainability. And you see the four major pillars that belongs to our association: the microbials, the predatory mites, insects, and nematodes; the semiochemicals with pheromones and plant volatiles; the microbials, with viruses, bacteria, and fungi; and the botanicals with plant extracts. So to enter into our company, it's a subsidiary of a Japanese group, and we develop in the BioGuard division a market a full range of biological products, offering strategies to control pests in integrated and organic agriculture. For the grape, we offer this range. For moth grape, we focus on pheromones and BT and Bacillus thuringiensis. For wine mealybug, we propose again microbials and a narrow range fine oils, but also we are developing pheromones again. In leafhopper, we at the moment are with natural pyretrum, but are developing vibrational disruption. We will see that later. And in mites, we have a microbial that is a Bovaria bassana formulation. In biologicals for grape disease, we tend to present pine extracts formulation with copper that is helping to reduce the number of interventions. The powdery mildew also with pine extracts sulfur formulation, and also with an hyperparasite microbial, IQ10, and potassium hydrogen carbonate. Then grey mold and bunch acid rots, we propose again a microbial that is Amylox bacillus amyloliquefacens. In pheromone, for viticulture, we have a long history. We started in '84. We had 10 years of initial development, and last year we celebrated our 20 years of area-wide control in Trentino in Italy. In these 20 years, we developed a lot of different products, taking into account the different pests available in the vineyard, which brought us to modulate, let's say, our product. And you see the list, and it's still continuing, the list of products that we bring to the market for this control. It's nice to see that the reduction of the insecticide use over these years in application of mating disruption is quite substantial. You can see the bars without any explanation, I think. And the same we had in Spain in another area-wide program that started in Carignana a few years ago, in 2011, in which you can see, again, the reduction of the insecticide interventions and the reduction of the infestation in the vineyard. At last example for pheromone in viticulture, I bring another example in southern in southern France, where you can see again 3 different types of experiences in which the experience with pheromones area-wide have helped to increase the control of the pest and to reduce the inputs in terms of insecticide sprays. Overall, today the grape pheromones are used, the grape moth pheromones are used on 330,000 hectares worldwide. The majority is in Europe. And I think this is a great achievement if we look back 30 years ago when this was initially just a small acreage. You can see also that there is a small statement in the bottom in USA. In California, USDA announced the eradication of grape moth in 2015 with the use of pheromones. We will see if this is resilient or not, but it was a new pest in the US, and definitely this tool helped them to manage properly the new invasive pest in their vineyards. For other pests, we propose, of course, as I said before, vine mealybug is another important pest, and we propose the parasitoids released on first generation to reduce the pest pressure. But we have also developed, again, mating disruption. And this is completed as a work, but the market availability will depend upon the EU approval, as usual. And we don't know exactly how far we are from there, but I predict that it will take another 3 or 4 years, maybe, I hope. Should be before. Again, on leaf hoppers, we have at this moment a limited number of tools. The natural pyrethrum is what we can propose as biological control, but there are also advanced studies on the communication of this pest, which is not by pheromones and is not by semiochemicals, is by vibration. A number of publications is done. There are many entomologists that have studied this and have published, and we are in development with a different approach in this case, an approach to disrupt this pest by disrupting their vibrational communication. I hope that this will be available soon in the market. But in the meantime, the entomologists have created another group, let's say, another science within the entomology that has been named biotrimology. There was the first international symposium on biotrimology last year in Trentino. And I hope that this is going to be a new tendency that will help biological control to develop further. For the other grape pest, as I said in my first slide, we also propose Bavaria bassiana microbial. This is an insect parasite fungus and is helping a lot in the control of mites, together with narrow-fine paraffinic oil. Grape disease, again, I try to go quick with these formulations. These are formulations with pine tree extract that are helping to reduce the number of sprays, because the pine tree extract is preventing the wash-off and the drift, so reducing the total application and the total input per season. We also propose an hyperparasite fungus, that is Ampelomyces quisqualis. This is helpful to reduce the infestation over the winter. And finally, the potassium hydrogen carbonate. The grape disease, again, is botrytis and bunch acid rot, in which we propose the Bacillus amyloliquefaciens, is a microbial bactericide and fungicide. So, to summarize, what biological first means for us is that our fundamental beliefs are that biological control products are first the products to be selected in IPM, are often preventive. They need to be applied first, very often. This is true for pheromones, for example. They are at the top of the sustainability today, and they are at the top of the management of resistance. At the top as well to avoid and reduce residues, and at the top of the low risk. And finally, at the top of the low impact. So BioGuard look to innovation first, and BioGuard team priority is to be the expert in biological control. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll take the last speaker, and then we'll go to our MEPs, and we need to give them some time. So this is environmental and socio-economic benefits of establishing a green business. Martin Suchanek.
Thank you. It's a big pleasure for me to be here. And I start a little bit romantic with the film. You see nice yellow flowering sunflowers. You don't see any visible differences between the chemical treatment and biological treatment, but visible is very different, because these sunflowers was treated only with our biofungicide. That's why it's the significant differences. Yes, we are a small company which have only 25 years history in biological plant protection, and we are located in the central Bohemia, near from Prague. And we are not sitting, or our offices is not in the big high skyscraper, because we live in the village. Why? Because we are not dangerous for the village, or also not because we produce the biological plant protection, but also because we have technology which is not which is not danger for our neighborhoods. And also our neighborhoods can work in our production units. We have about 50 people, employees. We have our independent registration people who many years works in the registration, we can say, subject. And also we have our independent research station, and also we have a few patents which are pending in all around the world. As I mentioned, I personally don't like the steel construction which can take the nice soil around the highways. That's why many of our production units are located inside the village, in the intravillan of the villages, where we reconstruct, for example, the old farms. And but we should equip this technology with the best standard which exists in the world, we can say, because we should really create technology which is updated. Now I want to show you our one of our production units. Also, it is located inside a village. It has about 4,500 square meters. Originally it was school, that's why we reconstructed for the purpose of production of plant protection fungicide. It looks like hospital, but it's not hospital. It's a biological production area. And capacity of this production unit is about 70 tons of formulated biofungicide, which means 700,000 square hectares, because we utilize only 100 grams of polyversum per hectare. You see, it is well equipped. What is important for us? We are no danger for the village, but sometimes is village danger for us, because we should be protected, because we are microbiological technology. That's why we should utilize the best air conditioning and also the best HEPA filters which exist. That's why, please, once more, we are no danger for the village, which is very important. That's why we can live in the peaceful relationship with our neighborhoods. That you see the technology, and now you see the packaging line. Capacity is 5 tons per day. All our technology we now have about 10,000 square meters, and our capacity is about 200 tons, which is equivalent of 2 million hectares. Here you see it is our oldest production unit, which is located in the nature park. It is very important for us. It is in full function last, we can say, 20 years. And we are without any harmful damaging of our nature park. We can produce, and we are connected in the water power station, and we produce each year here about 15 tons, which means 100,050 hectares. Yes, and there is my name. Sorry, I don't introduce myself. Yes, and what I want to show you is polyversum, which is the key product which we registered, and Pythium oligandrum is the active ingredients. You see, it has 3 modes of action: mycoparasitismus, induction of resistance, and growing stimulation. The target fungi which we fungal diseases which we can control successfully: Salternaria, botrytis, fusarium, also verticillium, and botrytis. I will show you later also the results. Registration in Czech Republic. I want to say you that we use this registration for mutual recognition in all central zone in Europe: cereal, wheat, barley, triticale, oilseed rape, mustard, rapeseed, sunflower. This is very important registration which we reach with our dear friend from company Gallen in Italy. It will be valid in the May 17. That's why only 2 months, and it is registration. It is white registration mainly for cash crop, and there is also registration for grape wine, and especially for botrytis. We performed the trials in 2 years. in 4 years. This is trials which was done in variety Merlot, and you see that we can easily compete with any chemical high standard which exists, which is registered for control of botrytis. But we can offer also the additional value because we have no waiting period. That's why we can be used just before the harvest. There is another trial which was performed in the year 2016. It was done in near from Faenza. Also the nice efficacy comparing with the chemical standard. And now back to the central zone. What we registered based on the mutual recognition from Czech Republic. You see there are the application niche which are similar for winter wheat as the chemical standard. That's why we use the same equipment, same amount of water, same timing, and we use only 100 gram per hectare, and we are registered for fusarium, which is very important. Also the spring barley, the same system, same application, same equipment. Only the grower can change the can with poison, with something which is environmental friendly. All seed rape, there is registration for Alternaria, for Verticillium, and on Foma and Sclerotinia. There you see the registration in Europe. It is mainly in the central zone: Czech, Slovak, Poland, Hungary, France, UK, Romania. Now you see, and it is, I think, the last 4 slides. Now you see how we make it in Czech Republic. We have about 400 customers. We manage about 40,000 hectares of arable land, and our registration is cereals, oilseed rape, and sunflower. It's the average. Now I want to show you the typical big Czech farm. It is cooperative, and the cooperative have about 7,000 hectares of agricultural land. The crop rotation is winter wheat, spring barley, oilseed rape, peas, poppy, and they use polyversum 5 years. Yield, average of the yield is very nice. It is very similar as in the other country in Europe. That's why they have 9 tons, barley 9 tons, oilseed rape 4.7. But what is important, the red is written. That's why they each year utilize 5.200 kg of polyversum, which means 5,200 hectares, and also it means saving of 5,200 liters of chemical fungicide. Another sample, it is a little bit smaller farm. They have only 3,500 hectares. The attitude is 260, and also crop rotation is very similar: barley, winter wheat, corn, oilseed rape. And they have a 4 years experience with our technology, and they use each year 120 kg, which is 1,200 hectares, which means saving 1,200 liters of chemical fungicide. Another farm, they have 700 hectares, and the crop rotation is similar, plus the sunflower, which you saw in my film before, and they use usually 130 kg, which means they save 1,300 liters of chemical fungicide. They have experienced 5 years, and I am sure that this farm is only one in the world, because it is conventional farm which don't use last 5 years any chemical fungicide. And average of the yield is similar as the neighborhood which use the chemical fungicide. That's why, sorry for this last sentence, don't worry banned azoles on any other dangerous synthetic fungicide, because alternative exists if I talk about arable crops. And I have a small summary, quick summary. What means the sustainability? What is similar with the synthetic fungicide? We have full registered biological fungicide. We have same application window. We have same application technology order. End user cannot change the technology. We have same prices, which is also important. And we have also nearly same production capacity like our big chemical competitor. And what is important, where we doesn't found a similarity, that's why we doesn't create resistance. We doesn't create residues, which is very important. We have no waiting periods comparing with the chemical fungicide. We are safe for operator. We are safe for not target organism. We have zero distance from the water quells, and we have 20 years experience. It's a little bit optimism for the future. Thank you for attention.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the two parliamentarians here to speak, but before they do, let me just say that we've been dealing with the vine sector, and we dealt last year with the apple sector. But if we're to run this symposium again in 2018, we've got to be on the Grand Culture. We've got to look at maize, or we've got to look at wheat, because otherwise we're not tackling. We're staying in a niche, and my perception of this meeting is that the industry is prepared to go from being a niche to being mainstream. So now, let me ask two parliamentarians here. Thank you very much for your attendance. I apologise for Pavel, who has had to go to another meeting, which is the disease that parliamentarians have. So let me start on my left and invite Herbert Dorfman to speak. Thank you, Herbert, for coming.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Sì, vado avanti in italiano. Ma io arrivo da una regione che...
Thank you. Well, I'm from a region which Mr. Veronelli also showed on a few of his slides, the South Tyrol. They're well known in Italy. It's a region or a province with a long experience in integrated pest management. We started with this decades ago now, and we set the standard really among farmers. So I don't think it's necessary to talk to you a lot about that. I've been listening to all of the different NGOs and their speeches, and it seems to me that you're talking about very technical things. So I just want to give you a quick overview of what I think, which are some political considerations on the topic.
Che la vite non è una pianta facile.
Obviously, vines are not an easy plant to deal with, especially when we're talking about diseases, and it's not a neutral issue in Europe either. It depends a great deal on a fundamental problem, which is that of the organic approach to wine growing and peronospores. And this is very much affected by the climate and the weather conditions in the area of reference. So, in my view, there are 3 points which are useful from a political point of view. Firstly, the politicians are available, as was said before, and in the fight against disease, as in wine growing, copper is a privileged product, but it certainly doesn't come without problems. As we know, it's a heavy metal that remains in the ground, and especially in difficult years such as that we experienced in 2007, it was used a great deal around Europe, which created a lot of problems which are still ongoing in the terms of the amount of products that were used. When it comes to other phosphates, I believe there's a long debate that our German colleagues have been having about the use of phosphonates. And there's this concept of low-risk pesticides. I think that we have heard some encouraging things today from certain speakers this afternoon. And there's a resolution which is currently being drawn up, and we'll discuss it next week in the plenary session, to move forward on these products. And I think this is a very useful field of work. I really believe that if we can manage to do this, then we will give research a boost. Research nowadays, researchers are a little afraid because of the long time frame. These things go hand in hand. If we have shorter registration times, then this will give a boost to companies such as the one we've just heard from, which are really committed to working in this field. My second point, which I believe is important, has to do with new diseases, new parasites. In my region, a lot of effort has been made over the past few years to reduce the use of chemical products. We're not really achieving the same results because there are new diseases now. There have been new diseases in my region, particularly for Bacanera grapes. And when these diseases emerge, farmers need to react. They can't always use the same methods that they used in previous years. So we need to learn how to manage these new parasites and do all within our means to make sure that we can contain these diseases. Because that's the issue, basically. What measures are we taking? My final point, which I'll close on, is that we haven't talked a lot about resistance. It's one of the keys of success, in my view, seeking more resistant plant varieties, especially against perennispore. I realise that certain plants are very traditional, certain species are very well known, certain varieties of oranges or apples, for example, have a better reputation, and it's important for the market, especially in the wine market. It's a very complex sector, so it's important to make sure that there are new varieties which are accessible to the consumer. I know that not everybody likes that concept, but it's certainly something that we have to discuss. We have to have a thorough debate about that, about these new methods of making plants more resistant. And it's politicians that have to also discuss this issue, because this could undoubtedly be a way forward for us to try to find more resistant varieties which don't suffer from the same problems that vines have had thus far, i.e. a loss of quality compared to previous varieties. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And finally, Marco Zullo.
Thank you very much. And firstly, I'd like to apologise for arriving late. I was a bit busy with other things. I'd like to tell you about my experiences over the past couple of years in DG Agri. I have been working on agricultural issues, and it was a new world for me when I entered in, but I'm starting to find my feet now. I have visited numerous farms, and I've been able to find out what the main problems are of the average farmer. And the wine sector, in my view, is one of the best organised sectors in agriculture, and it's certain that it suffers more from certain problems than other sectors. But the experiences I've had have shown me that we need to go back to our roots. We might think this is strange or even trivial, but nowadays farmers don't know how to do anything else because they're part of a system where they have to carry out certain procedures in very clinical ways, when they carry out certain checks or certain activities, when they apply certain methods. These methods are applied almost in a sense of unawareness, so people don't really know why they're doing certain things. And this has an impact on the production, on the quantities produced, and so on. So in my point of view, we need to help the sector so that it doesn't lose contact with nature. We need to focus on national rhythms, the need for biodiversity. We must promote the idea that not all insects are pests to be eradicated, but that often they can be beneficial. And this is happening at the moment. This is happening currently, because there are areas where the use of pesticides or phytosanitary products has decreased a great deal. People have realised that there's no need to use these products. There are other methods that are just as effective, if not more. And the use of these substances has been reduced a great deal. In some places it's even been eliminated. This demonstrates that there is an alternative route which can be followed. And I consider the role of politicians a very important one. The institutions need to see what's happening on the territory and introduce all possible tools to create a network. When we talk about organisation, often what's missing is sharing, so knowledge sharing, sharing of best practices, and so on, and being able to be reactive to situations. It's difficult to respond rapidly when problems arise. That's why we need to keep giving input to the regions. The Commission and the institutions must never lose sight of that, and we need to keep working in that regard, especially when it comes to education and training, because in that area as well, what I have seen has revealed to me that students often don't have a 360-degree view. They're very focused on a specific sector, and they don't always manage to follow the natural rhythm of the seasons and understand that. So that's the experiences that I wanted to share with you today. Thank you.
So, thank you. If you look at the calendar, it says we should have finished at 6 o'clock. If you look at what we were to do at 10 to 6, I was to summarise. So I have 10 minutes, which will take me 10 seconds, and that is that I will summarise. But the summary is that overall, there's been a much more positive approach in terms of what we think we are doing and where we can go in the pursuit of IPM over, particularly in the wine sector, but a bit more broadly as well. There is a huge amount of work done, and we should be grateful to those who have done it. Some of that work has been by the industry, some of it by farmers, some of it by our MEPs and by the Council and the Commission. We respect all that. There is much work to be done in the next year, 2 years, to move from being a niche out into a broadly acceptable and growing part of the sustainability aspects of agriculture, and the Chairman's conclusions will reflect that. So that's the Chairman's over. I want to thank a couple of people. First of all, the interpretation service for hanging on with us. I'm sure you're all very grateful to them. I want to thank Pavel in particular for sponsoring us, and I want to thank Isabel and Henriette for the work they have done in putting this conference together. If I've left somebody out, I apologise to them. Thank you very much. The séance is closed. Oh, sorry. Don't forget that there's wine on the ground floor. You can swim down to it or swim up from it.
Swim down.